Hello, sailors. Today we will be talking about and going over the book V for Vendetta. We will mainly be focusing on the thematic issue of love and how it drives people to do things for each other, as well as how love drives people to do crazy things. We too will go over how love can be a drug because love can make people crazy, even causing them to be depressed. So throughout V for Vendetta, we can obviously see instances of love, specifically with Evie and V. But love can also be seen with Adam Susan, as he devolves into craziness due to fate. Let's first look at Evie and V. V always loved Evie. He wanted to help her. It was this love he had for her that made him want to help her. Now we will go over how this love made the two who they are. V loves Eve, and all he wants is good for her. Eve does not think V loves her after she leaves the fake prison because V tortured her. After V explains everything though, Eve finally realizes that he truly does love her and wanted to set her free from fear. It took V dying, a parallel to Gordon's death, for Evie to truly understand that V did love her. When she lost someone she loved, that is when it hurt the most, like her father. These events set her back to reality. The main point here is that Evie was set free and saved from fear, all because of V and the love he had for her. This love is what drove her through everything, even when she took on V's role to continue what he had started, the world of builders. So now that we have gone over the love of Evie and V, basically the love that drives people, we will now be going over Adam Susan and Fate. Adam Susan is the leader of Northfire and is a peculiar man. He calls Fate his bride and says he is not loved but feared and respected, and that is enough for him. Adam Susan says he does not care if he is not loved, but V has secretly tampered with Fate, and he put a message on the computer which read, "I love you," which scares Susan. Susan begins to think, maybe I am loved by Fate, but it was V the whole time. He never figures that out, and he starts going crazy, basically begging Fate to tell him she loves him. This can tie into how love can be a drug which has caused Adam Susan to start going crazy. Okay, sailors, we are now moving on to our first outside example of the thematic issue of love, other than in V for Vendetta. We will be quickly reviewing Click, starring Adam Sandler, and then analyzing the ways love has affected the characters in the book. Watch out for parallels, which can be noticed throughout. In the movie Click, starring Adam Sandler, he plays the role of Michael. Michael is a workaholic who does not make time for his family. The fact that he makes no time for them is having a negative effect on his home life, and he regularly argues with his wife. Michael lives next to the O'Doyle family, who seemingly makes good money, as they are always getting their son cool toys and buying things for themselves, which their son brags about. Michael was told by his son, Ben, in the first scene of the movie, that the O'Doyle family bought a universal remote control, which controls everything in the house, so older people like Michael can deal with the TV. Later, after having some struggle with his TV remote, Michael goes to Bed Bath & Beyond to find a universal remote control to buy. He finds a back room called Beyond's, and walks in to find a man named Morty, who, after some discussion, gives Michael a universal control for free. Michael gets home, and the remote works on the TV. His wife then comes downstairs, and they start arguing about Michael not going on the family camping trip. Michael pauses the TV to talk to her, and we see that she herself is paused. Michael then later jokingly turned the volume down on his dog, and it worked. He messes around with this and goes to bed. Michael then begins to skip through all the unpleasantries in life, arguing, traffic, showering, sickness, all with his remote. He then thinks that he has become partner at his company, but this was false. He would still have to work more for it. So he skips time to when he will become partner of his company, and he finds it has been over a year. Michael discovers that his wife and him are having problems because when he skips time, he goes into autopilot mode, like a zombie. Michael then tries to get rid of the remote, but Morty tells him there is no getting rid of it. It is revealed that the remote has been accustomed to Michael's habits. It skips through everything for him. Then Michael is offered a promotion to head of international affairs, and Michael says he wants to be CEO, and it time skips 10 years because the remote thinks Michael wants to skip all work until he gets a promotion, and Michael wakes up being about 400 pounds. He goes to his old house to find his son is almost as fat as him, his daughter a punk girl with a boyfriend, and his wife divorced him and married Bill, Ben's old swim coach. Then they get into an argument, and Michael hits his head, and it skips through his sickness because he had cancer. The time skip lasts 6 years, and he's obviously extremely sad. He is no longer fat because he had a liposuction, and the tummy flap left behind is very loose, and Michael plays with it. He then finds that he is CEO of the company he worked at. His son Ben lost all the weight, and his father is dead. He then goes to his father's grave and tries to go back to the memory of his passing, but Morty tells him he was not there, and he goes to the last time he saw him. Michael hates himself for ignoring him when he was on autopilot. Morty reveals to Michael that he is the angel of death, hence the name Morty, and death meaning morte in Italian. Michael then skips time to go to a good place, which is his son's wedding. He then finds his mother and has a heartfelt conversation with her. He sees his daughter, Samantha, and sees her call Bill dad, which leads to a heart attack. He wakes up in a hospital on machines. His son and daughter visit him, but have to go back home and go to their car. Michael then runs out of the hospital in the rain to catch them, and he collapses as he tries to yell for his son. Then, all of his family, his kids, wife, and even Bill surround him, knowing it is his final moments. Morty then appears and tells Michael the note he wrote for his wife was still in his pocket, and he gives it to her. It says, "Will you still love me in the morning?" And she responds,
"Forever and ever, babe."
to their first date. Michael then wakes up in Bed Bath & Beyond. It is the same night that he bought the remote, and he realizes it was all a dream. Michael returns home to find his wife and kids and vows to always put family over everything. As he was going to bed, he finds the universal remote with a note saying, "I know you'll do the right thing this time," from Morty. Michael realizes it was all real, but it was just a warning to make Michael realize that family is more important than anything else. This is connected to V for Vendetta because Michael was doing all that for the love of his family and the love they had for him. Michael did not want to work for selfish reasons, but wanted to improve his family's life. Michael lost sight of that and ended up hurting his family rather than helping them. How Michael decided to do all he does and work so much for his family is a parallel to how V and Evie loved each other so much that they would do anything to help each other. Evie thinks that when V puts her in the fake prison, he is hurting her, even though he is trying to help her free herself, as Michael was trying to help his family. Of course, in V for Vendetta, V does help free Evie from her mental prison, while it is Morty, the angel of death, who is the one helping Michael free himself. There is also a direct parallel between Click and V for Vendetta with the idea that only you can free yourself, as seen with Evie and Eric Finch. Another parallel on Click to V for Vendetta is how Michael died in his wife Donna's arms, as V died in Evie's. Moving on, we will be discussing the tale of heartbreak, Romeo and Juliet. To give you an idea of the story, there are two families, the Capulets and the Montagues, who have always been feuding, and on one side the Montagues sits Romeo, and the Capulets with Juliet. I am going to break down this story and analyze how love is a drug, which drives people to do crazy things for each other, and the depression it can cause. In Romeo and Juliet, when Romeo is banished, Juliet is heartbroken, and to her, him being banished is basically a death sentence, and she wishes to die with Romeo. This can be considered her being willing to do something crazy for love, and because of Romeo's banishment, she became depressed, and this depression occurred because of love. We can compare this angst Juliet has to when Evie was planning to kill the men who murdered Gordon, her lover. When Romeo confirms that Juliet is dead, he begins to speak. Romeo was giving this speech to God, and that he wants God to steer him to death. Romeo is tributing his suicide to his love, Juliet, before he drinks the poison. This once again shows how love makes people do crazy things for each other, as Eve did for V after his death, giving him his Viking funeral and blowing up the subway line underneath Downing Street. Once Juliet awakes, she sees Romeo's dead body and realizes what has happened. She decides to do as Romeo did, to lie with his love in the afterlife, and she takes her life as she says that she is the sheath of the knife, and the knife belongs inside her. To Juliet, without that piece of her, Romeo, living would be the most horrible experience of them all. Something similar to this in V for Vendetta is when Evie is in V's fake prison. Evie thinks the same as Juliet did. Without that piece of her, her dignity and integrity, she was no longer willing to live, as she would never sell out V, her true love, for her own life. Evie tells the guard her statement is false, the statement that could have released her from her prison. Evie chose death instead, and for this, V finally reveals everything to her, and made her realize she is free from fear. The story of Romeo and Juliet is very tragic, as Romeo and Juliet were ultimately never able to live their lives as lovers, but they did love each other to the fullest extent before they both took their own lives. This story overall connects to my argument. Love is a drug, one that drives people crazy. Wow, good job, sailors. You've almost made it to the end of the video. Now I am going to tell you all about the chain of events with Mark Antony and Cleopatra, which led to their double suicide. To begin, Mark Antony was a triumvirate of Rome starting in 42 BC. He ruled the east provinces of Rome. One day, Antony invited Cleopatra to the city of Alexandria to try and gain an ally in Egypt to complete an expedition against the Parthians to avenge Julius Caesar. While in Alexandria, Antony fell wildly in love with Cleopatra, as did she to him. When the two were together, they didn't really care about politics or niceties, and they loved going on adventures. They had regular feasts, and Antony even led a double life, being a political leader in Rome with his wife and being an adventurous man with Cleopatra in Egypt. Back in Rome, Antony's wife and his brother were posing a political challenge to Octavian, the triumvirate who ruled West Rome. This conspiracy fell though, but left Antony's loyalty to Rome questionable to Octavian. With his wife dead, to prove his loyalty to Octavian, Antony married Octavian's sister, Octavia. But even after that, Antony still spent time with Cleopatra, and Octavian viewed that with disdain. All good things come to an end, of course. Tensions grew between Octavian and Antony. A war broke out. Octavian was targeting Egypt, and eventually, Antony's armies fell. Antony tried running away with Egypt's armies at the Battle of Actium, but it was no use. Antony, thinking Cleopatra was already dead, he stabbed himself with a sword, but was then taken to die in Cleopatra's arms. Mark Antony died on August 1st, 30 BC. Cleopatra was captured, but managed to kill herself via a poisonous snake bite, ending their love story, once again showing how love drives people to do crazy things and that love is a drug, an addictive one. This story too has a parallel to V for Vendetta, with Antony dying in Cleopatra's arms as V died in Evie's. It also matches up to Click when Michael died in Donna's arms. And you could even say that no matter what, love will always bring people back to each other in the end. Another thing in this story, similar to V for Vendetta, is how Antony would have rather died than to be taken from his love, as Evie would have rather be executed than to give up V to the Norse Fire Party, and how Juliet would rather be dead than to live without Romeo. Congratulations, sailors! We are now wrapping up this analysis and argument with V for Vendetta, all about love. We have seen parallels and similarities throughout all these stories and examples about how love is a driving force for all things crazy. Love is also the most viral breeding ground for tragedy, seen in Romeo and Juliet, as well as Cleopatra and Mark Antony, in which both stories ended in a double suicide. We shouldn't get ahead of ourselves though. You always have to remember the main argument. Love drives people to do things for each other. Crazy things. It is a drug you need to be cautious with, or it could cause the greatest of tragedies. With that, we conclude this video venture. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one, sailors. Peace!